Picture the stereotype. A caveman dragging home multiple partners, a prehistoric strongman surrounded by wives competing for his attention. It's a scene that shows up constantly in movies, cartoons, and casual assumptions about our ancestors. It is also, according to the actual anthropological record, almost completely backwards. In 1968, an anthropologist named Richard Lee spent time living among the Juhoansi, a hunter-gatherer people of the Kalahari Desert, who, at the time, still lived a lifestyle close to how humans survived for most of our species' history. Lee documented the marital status of 131 married men in the community, and the results were almost the exact opposite of the popular imagination. 122 of those men, 93%, were living in a straightforward monogamous marriage with exactly one wife. Only 7 men, about 5%, had more than one wife at the same time, and of those, most were married to 2 sisters rather than 2 unrelated women. 2 men, less than 2%, were actually in the reverse arrangement. 1 woman shared between 2 husbands. The prehistoric harem barely existed. What existed instead looks remarkably close to what most modern relationships still look like today. This finding sits at the center of a real disagreement in anthropology, and it's worth understanding why the confusion exists in the first place. Back in 1967, a researcher named George Murdoch compiled something called the Ethnographic Atlas, a massive database cataloging the customs of hundreds of human societies. Murdoch found that the overwhelming majority of these societies, somewhere around 80 to 90% depending on how you count it, formally permitted a man to take more than one wife under their cultural rules. For decades, that single statistic got repeated as proof that humans are, by nature, a polygynous species. But permitting something, and actually practicing it, turn out to be 2 very different things. And Richard Lee's direct, on-the-ground count of real marriages is exactly the kind of evidence that exposes the gap. The reason for that gap comes down to brutally simple economics. In a hunter-gatherer society, there is no stored wealth. No bank account, no herd of cattle, no granary a man can point to and say, "This proves I can provide for multiple households." Supporting even one wife and her children required constant, daily physical effort: hunting, foraging, defending, sharing. Taking on a second wife didn't just mean twice the companionship, it meant twice the mouths depending on you, with no surplus anywhere to draw from. Across dozens of studied hunter-gatherer groups, the same pattern shows up again and again. Where men don't control significant material wealth, polygyny stays rare, no matter what the culture technically allows, because most men simply cannot afford the reality of it. What ancient family life actually seems to have run on wasn't multiple wives, but flexibility. Divorce and remarriage happened constantly and without much stigma, because there was no inherited property tying 2 people together, and no religious institution demanding permanence. If a relationship stopped working, either partner could genuinely just walk away, taking their children into the safety net of the wider band, which functioned less like a modern nuclear household and more like an entire extended family, sharing the work of raising every child in the camp. It wasn't unusual across a woman's lifetime for her to have children with 2 or even 3 different partners in sequence. Not because ancient people were promiscuous by nature, but because the social structure made moving on, when needed, remarkably low risk compared to the world we live in now. There's something almost tender in that arrangement once you really look at it. Nobody was trapped. A woman leaving a bad partner didn't face financial ruin because there was no personal fortune to lose custody of, and no isolated household she'd be abandoning alone, because the entire band helped raise the children, regardless of whose biological father was whose. The safety net wasn't one husband's wealth, it was the group itself. In some strange way, the absence of stored wealth may have given ancient women more genuine freedom to leave an unhappy pairing than many women held for most of recorded human history afterward, once farming, property, and inheritance entered the picture and turned marriage into an economic contract worth fighting to keep intact. So when you picture the ancient human family, put away the image of one man ruling over a cave full of wives. Picture something closer to what Richard Lee actually found, sitting in the Kalahari. Overwhelmingly, one partner at a time, loosely bound, easily renegotiated, and backed not by wealth or ownership, but by an entire community that considered every child in the camp worth protecting. The prehistoric harem was never really the norm. The prehistoric safety net was.